I've always wanted to visit Dubnu since I was a graduate student. And so coming here was absolutely wonderful. What I saw here was quite remarkable in many ways. And it was also connected with what I saw of Russian art. And my impressions here, and also from what I saw of art in Russia, was that in some sense the West and Russia are living in parallel universes. Mm-hmm. And there's some coupling between the two of them. With science, there's much stronger coupling. But, for example, I saw the pulse neutron reactor yesterday, which was absolutely fascinating, which I think was finished in 1957. And this was at the time of Sputnik. So I saw this time that was enormously influential in America. I mean, Sputnik transformed America. So I saw this development here, which was ahead of America. And then later on, the Americans came forward. But Russia has such a enormous tradition in history and mathematics and physics, and in some ways it's only loosely coupled to the West. So you sort of see developments here and developments over here and here, and then there's a little bit of crosstalk. And I just found that fascinating. There's just Russia has an incredible history. It was an incredible empire, and quite separate from the West, and extraordinarily accomplished. So you see things like in the West, but they're done a little bit differently. Maybe they're a little bit more clever. The pulse neutron reactor was very clever. They didn't do that in the West. So how do I say that? I just really, really wish you well, and I really wish that you get the support that you need to continue this great tradition that you have.
Thank you.
I don't know. Did that
Thank you
address?
for such a kind words. I also like to say that for us, for scientists of GINR, visit by Professor George Cveiga was also long-awaited event, because we already discussed about how when for the first time we were known about discovery of quarks made in works independently by George Cveiga and Murray Gell-Mann. So in 1964, here in Dubna, because maybe great enthusiasm and best exception of this idea by Nikolai Nikolaevich Bogolyubov, so we switched on to this problem and started to work looking for a real theory of quark structure of the hadron. So, and we, of course, had the imagination to look and talk to Professor George Cveiga what happened after maybe already so many years, but we're very glad, and we're especially glad that young people also had the possibility to hear you, to hear and to learn how great imagination and deep knowledge of the physics of such events important to make such a discovery, which in fact played an extremely important role in the history, in development of ideas about elementary particles, about the structure of matter on small scales, etc. So, and I think that your visit to us very important would be remembered by our young people and by us, because we think that idea of course played really very, very important role in development of particle physics and fundamental physics, also physics of universe, its appearance as a result of big explosion. So, and also very interesting to know that when you talk about not just about only course problem, but about how science is working, how brain is working, also very important. So it's really.
Well, thank you for the kind words.
How are you related with Russia?
How am I related to Russia? A long and deep relation. My parents came to Russia with a 5-year contract to work here. My father was an engineer. And while they were there, or here, I was born. And after 5 years, when the contract was finished, my parents left. We went to Vienna and then eventually to the United States. My father was a structural engineer here and worked on factories in the Ural Mountains. In fact, I think you have the world's largest wind tunnel, which in the Ural Mountains, which he designed at the time. It's not for scale models. It's for the whole plane. He also designed the supports around the Kremlin. You see the 5 stars. He designed the supports. You know, he signed a contract with Stalin to do that work. I thought my father was a very smart man, but I would have never signed the contract with Stalin.
So you were clever.
But it seemed to be okay.
But after 32, he thought about that, because in 32 Hitler took power.
Yes. Well, he was
natural
he was. Thank you. He was a structural engineer, a structural or civil engineer, and he was working in Germany at the time. And when Hitler was elected, he thought that war with Russia was inevitable. And he was a communist, and he knew people in the Communist Party in Germany. Communist Party was reasonably strong. So he knew people at the highest level, and they arranged for this contract for him to come to Moscow. And then he went to the Ural Mountains. Because when he got to Moscow, no one heard of him. No one knew anything about this.
Let me add to what you told and what we have told about how United States and Russia is some parallel, let's say, but in fact, science unites people.
Yes, it does.
It's in our experience in the life of our institute, we have many proof of that. For example, in spite of all problems, political and others, which always exist. So I remember how when Fermilab in the United States was constructed its first machine with record parameters, the GINR, United States, signed an agreement about participation of GNR physicists and Russian physicists in the first experiments in Fermilab. I was one of those happy physicists who were sent by our institute to Fermilab to work together. I was a theorist, but nevertheless close to my experimentalists, and it was a very interesting experience. How, in spite of all, let's say, problems, people are able and want to work together, and how have to be wise people who decide that it is possible and it's needed, because when we work together, so it is some sort of guarantee that peace can be and should be saved and should be preserved. So, and in spite of all, we always enjoy such a great, good relation between scientists, which helps to let's say, to better understanding between people. So, and when there is a slogan, let's say, science brings nations together, it's really, it's a gift. So, our experience, we observe, it's very important. So, and
well, there's also a very, I would say, different tradition in Russia. I was going to say the Soviet Union. When I was a student and I was learning about the mathematics that I could use, in high energy physics. The mathematicians and their books in America were not very useful. They were very formal, very difficult to understand. But I would go to the Russian literature, the Russian books, and they were just much more helpful. For example, I was interested in representations of Lie algebras. So where should I go? Well, I go to Vilenkin's book. And this is something you can read. It's beautiful. It's clear. I can understand it. I can use it. If I want to learn quantum mechanics, where should I learn quantum mechanics? Should I learn it from Schiff in America, or should I go to Landau and Lifshitz? I learned my quantum mechanics from Landau and Lifshitz. There was this, I don't know, tradition of somehow simplicity and understanding what the essence of something is and presenting it so that people can understand it without a lot of unnecessary irrelevancies. And that tradition was very strong in Russia, and it benefited us in America very much. So this separation that we've had, it sometimes has some benefit, because you go over here and you develop a certain way of thinking, and then you cross it over, instead of having everybody mixed together and somehow all thinking alike. So you want a little separation, but then you have to have connection.
George, could you comment on Russian art?
Well, I was blown away. I have an interest in art. Just going back to my roots, my father, I was telling this story. My father, when he was older, went blind, and I was helping him organize his desk. And in his desk, I found a diploma from the Technische Hochschule in Vienna in engineering, structural engineering. And then I found a second diploma the same day in art history. So
at the same time.
Same time. Worked his way through two universities at the same time. So you know, I looked at art when I was young, and later on, when I was in university, I would take classes. So I think I know something about Western art. So Sasha takes me in to the museum here with the Russian art before the 20th century, and there's room after room, and I see these paintings, and they're gorgeous. But there's something different about them. It's, again, the parallel universe. They had some idea of Renaissance art, but then they used it in a different way. And they had different material and different ideas of what they wanted to represent. Room after room after room, and I never heard of anybody. Who are these people? So, so in art, there's less pressure or advantage to cooperating. In science, it's much more. And, you know, it sort of convinced me that we have this great empire with this great history, and it's just moving here, and the West doesn't understand, knows nothing about it. They're ignorant.
It becomes so interesting. I think it's better to proceed under the lunch, under the table, because otherwise we will never
finish.
So,
people are hungry.
Наверное, достаточно, да?
Ну, маленький вопрос в заключение. Напутствие молодым ученым, молодым физикам или студентам физических факультетов. Какое пожелание профессор может дать нашей молодежи?
They didn't want to leave us without answer on just one small question about what would like to tell to the young people, let's say, for
young scientists.
Making steps in science.
Oh my God.
The most
Well, first of all, there are many different kinds of young people. So each one needs slightly different advice. So I can't advise them all. I just think that this is just for a small group that would be like me, that think like me. I think they should look at what is measured and make sure that people here in Russia make measurements. And, for example, in Nika, look at what's measured and keep looking at it until you really understand what's there. So found your work in observation, but then when you're young, learn a lot of mathematics, because you're not going to learn it later on, and sooner or later maybe you can have the two work together.
Спасибо. Thank you really very much.
Thank you.